All right, let's go. Let's head over to the Windy City. Ha, quote unquote, pun intended, right? So we're looking at game time conditions of temperatures around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to have winds over 20 miles per hour. I do want to be clear, as the game goes on, you're going to see winds start to subside as you kind of move through the game. That being said, it's still winds. When you ever get into winds in that 20 mile per hour range, it's something important to pay attention to. Those are the types of games that can really kind of skew the outcomes of these types of games. So we have two solid elite quarterbacks going up in this game. We have Justin Fields on the Chicago side and Josh Allen on Buffalo's side. And to be clear, I know Justin Fields, he's new. He's blossoming in his career. So, but Josh Allen is robust. And, we've seen the Buffalo Bills in very windy games windier than this, let Josh Allen throw the ball, right? So he is going to still do his thing. We know that both quarterbacks have a solid rushing floor here. Do we expect a type of outcome like in Cleveland, Sean, in this particular matchup?
No, I'm not. I don't think there's a high likelihood of this being like a 7-13 type of score or anything like that. I think you hit on it right. Josh Allen can play in these conditions. The only conditions we really see a drop off for Josh Allen is when there's precipitation and rain. We do see a drop off, but cold and wind within reason, and this is within reason. I mean, yeah, we have winds around 20 miles an hour, maybe gusts up to 30, but like you said, they still have Josh Allen slinging, and he's still able to compete well in the passing game in these conditions. So on that side of the ball, I'm not worried. I'm playing Diggs. I'm playing Allen. Gabe Davis, yeah, maybe I'm a little concerned if it gets really windy here. Maybe some of those deep targets that he's relied on, maybe some of those don't hit, or there's a lower probability of them hitting. But I'm still okay playing him in this matchup. On the running side, like Singletary, Cook, like I don't really know who to start there. I think regardless of whether that's a tough one, even though Chicago is susceptible on the ground, giving up 148 yards over the last 3 per game. But overall, from a Buffalo standpoint, I'm okay playing with whoever you need to play.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I think Khalil Herbert is actually on designated to return from the IR. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that. But I mean, we expect an uptick in some of the rushing attempts here in this game, Sean, with regards to David Montgomery and maybe Herbert?
Yeah, and then kind of focusing on the Buffalo side, well, what about Justin Fields? And I think you're relying heavily, especially in this game, relying on his rushing ability, because we do know that the games that we have seen Fields play in windy conditions, he has a really low floor in terms of his passing. Like we're talking like in like 130, 140 yards that we've seen him throw in windy games. But we have seen a real uptick in his rushing ability. So I think you're relying on that with regards to Fields. Now, Mike, you mentioned Montgomery, and yeah, I think we're going to see a few more opportunities here. And Buffalo's, again, their defense has loosened up on the kind of the second half of the season a little bit. They've been up around 108 yards per game over the last 3 on the ground. Montgomery, weirdly, when looking up some of his stats, in really cold conditions and really windy conditions, his yards per carry is just kind of down a little bit, which was surprising to me. So, I'm not expecting anything exceptional out of the ordinary from Montgomery. I think they're going to give it to him. I think he'll get volume. I don't know. I wouldn't anticipate him to be more overly productive in this game compared to normal, though.
Okay, that's fair. How about on the I don't really want to focus on the wide receivers of Chicago in this one, just because we know that Fields is going to pretty much run the ball most of the time and then kind of do some rely on his running backs a lot more. But maybe Cole Kmet gets a little bit in the mix. How about on the other side? I mean, when people are in the playoffs, right, most people in the playoffs are probably having some elite level wide receivers, so like Stephon Diggs or even Gabe Davis is probably an option here. Do we think that there's any sort of risk involved with starting them this week?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm playing Diggs. Okay. I have no problem playing Diggs. We've seen Diggs perform in cold and windy conditions before. I don't think these are overly extreme conditions like in Cleveland as far as wind. Like you said, I expect these conditions to die down a little bit in terms of wind. It'll be breezy, but I still expect Diggs to get his fair share. And Chicago they're susceptible through the air. They just are. They're giving up like 266 yards through the air on average. And so I think Josh Allen's going to pick him apart. Like I mentioned with Gabe Davis, like, am I a little bit more hesitant about maybe some of these deep targets hitting? Maybe.
This is a crosswind event.
Yeah, and so again, is there potentially a little bit lower of a probability of some of these hitting? Yeah, potentially, but I'm not sitting him. I think if you're relying on it against this Chicago defense, I think I'm going. I mean, again, the over/under in this game is 40, and the Bills are favored by 9. So they're expecting the Bills to score some points here. It's a low over/under, but they're favoring the Bills by 9. So somebody's got to score.
Understood.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the beneficiaries of that were Diggs in Gabe Davis.
There are some fantasy players out there that's going to be starting kickers in their league, and Tyler Bass is always an attractive option, right? 20-mile-per-hour wind, crosswind event for half the game, cold weather. Any concerns there? Do we recommend finding an alternative option in maybe a game that has less weather to be at risk?
Here's my thing with kickers and weather. Especially wind. Typically, coaches recognize if it's rainy or especially if it's really windy, that they're not going to put their kicker out there to attempt a 60-yarder. So already you're limiting that player's upside a little bit because probably the coach's decision most likely is not to try to go out there and kick a 52-yarder. Maybe that player gets a bunch of opportunities of like 30-yarder, 35-yarder, maybe 40-yarder, and maybe they get 3 or 4 opportunities and they hit him and his score actually looks okay. But I think your ceiling with these players from a kicking standpoint is limited a little bit because the coaching decisions are usually to punt it or maybe go for it in those situations. And so, am I excited about Bass in this one? I think he's going to get his opportunities. I just don't think you could count on these bomb kicks that, we know he's capable.
Okay, so you're reducing the probability of hitting your type of ceiling events in his historical distribution of outcomes rather, probably more of his towards his floor. Or normal conditions. Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that we've covered this game pretty well, and